Welcome to Cinemagogue. I'm James Harleman, your host. We're looking at the Muppets, who languished in obscurity for almost a decade, and thanks to the work of Jason Segel and many others, are now back in the public eye with a vengeance. Even the trailers for this movie showed that it was going to be inventive, fun, and self-aware. Bella swine. If they'd actually made the Twilight movies like this, I might have liked them. I grew up with the Muppets. I probably learned much of my wisdom and kindness from Kermit the Frog, my adventurous spirit from Gonzo the Great, probably some of my foolishness too, and everything I ever needed to learn about humor I learned from Fozzie the Bear. Oh yeah, 24/7 at the Harleman house. You probably need to pray for my wife. From the Muppet movie in 1979 through the wealth of Muppet tales, Jim Henson and his creations have touched so many other places as well. Sesame Street, The Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, Dinosaurs, Farscape. You could throw a Fraggle Rock, you'll hit something Henson Productions was involved in. And of course, sadly, Jim Henson passed away in 1990, but his legacy lives on. The real question was, should the Muppets? I mean, they're animals that are neither mutant nor ninja. You don't have to catch them all. Had the world moved on, or were they relics? Were they not needed anymore? Jason Segel, actor and writer known for his work on television in the series Freaks and Geeks and How I Met Your Mother, he didn't think so. To me, Kermit was the original Tom Hanks, the everyman, Segel said. He really shaped what I wanted to be as an actor. When he put a script together, he wanted to bring the franchise back to what he called the perfect tone they'd established in the early 80s. He wanted to bring back the story because he believed it had value. He wanted to redeem the Muppets because the story and the characters helped shape him. And that's the heart of Cinemagogue and film and theology, that film can educate us, inform us about how other people think or who we are as we identify with the characters, that we can be edified as we engage it thoughtfully. We can actually grow richer as people, even by watching a movie like The Muppets. And as Paul the Apostle did in Acts 17, engaging poetry, culture, traveling through the marketplace. He was sifting culture for ways to connect the stories of that area with the story of the gospel, the story of God. He tells us to think about the things of God and put his example into practice. It's a big part of what being a Christian is all about. The four major themes we can take from this movie are responsibility and regret, rainbows, and relationships. There's that fantastic 80s power ballad Oscar award-winning moment when Gary has his head tipped skyward, Walter's looking in the mirror and they're asking, are we men or are we Muppets? I reflect on my reflection. I ask myself the question, what's the right direction to go? I don't know. Haven't we all felt that way? I have. Feeling like you're stuck, that you got that longing inside you. Even maybe as you sing Life's a Happy Song, there's something that doesn't quite fit, that doesn't work. You've had days like this. You've probably had weeks like this. Some of you have had years like this. Maybe things aren't terrible, but it's like the car's stuck in neutral. You wake up singing, but you're kind of sitting at an intersection in life and nothing's moving forward. Even at the beginning of the movie, Walter knows something's a little off. Things aren't really perfect, he says, and Mary has her sad little aside with the rain, or, well, the hose outside. Right? The only one who seems to be happy at the beginning is Gary, and we know he's oblivious to a few very important things. The Muppets movie gets to deal with two very different factors: maturity and growing up, and gifting and calling, who we're supposed to be. There are days we all feel like this, right? In our culture of prolonged adolescence, we look in the mirror, am I a Muppet of a man? We look at what men of old accomplished. We read biographies, history books, and we look like Muppety men at best, right? I'm not even sure I'd be a very manly Muppet by some of those old standards. And a lot of times it's admittedly because you and I, we haven't stepped up. We're too comfortable. We're afraid or we're abdicating. Sometimes we are lazy. Gary, for instance, he has to step up and actually propose to Mary. He has to put her first. He should marry her. It's kind of obvious. Her name's Mary. He needs to take responsibility, like Mark 10 says. God created us male and female. A man, he shouldn't be stringing a woman along forever and ever. He should leave father and mother or sibling and hold fast to his wife. She needs to become first priority above friends, career, dreams, hobbies. But let's be clear. What does it mean to grow up? He needs to put her first, but even in the film, they don't give up the Muppets. They're still cavorting with these same childlike characters. See, there's a lie out there, a snare that would have you trade your trappings instead of truly maturing. There's a lie that says you need to trade comic books for Sports Team X. You need to stop watching cartoons and watch CSI. You need to stop drinking peanut butter and banana milkshakes and start drinking Bud Light from a can. Sometimes even Christians will trot out verses to proof text this. They'll say, hey, 1 Corinthians 13:11 says, when I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. Question is, what are childish ways? It doesn't mean you have to stop watching those cheesy Godzilla movies and watch wrestling. Actually, Godzilla battles seem less fake. That verse is often taken out of context. It actually applies to people who are obsessed with their theology and their prophecy and knowledge and all sorts of Christianese stuff, but they weren't loving each other. Jesus passed along words through the apostle that said, stop playing with your spiritual toys and religious one-upmanship. All that stuff passes away, but love never ends. Grow up and start loving like Jesus. It doesn't mean you have to trade certain cultural ideas of childhood for manhood. What it means is you need to meet your responsibilities of love and service, caring and working for those God's called you to, not the trappings of culture that might distract you, where you just go from one self-indulgence to another. Don't fall for that. And for some of you, maybe you have. Maybe that's what life's been like. Maybe some of you didn't identify most with Walter and Gary in the movie. Maybe it was Kermit. You find yourself in a profound state of regret, like something's broken in your life that's beyond repair. That now the best moments of your life are only pictures in your head. Something's broken, and there's part of you that longs, wishes you could do it all again. In an interview with Jason Segel, he said, at some point you have to man or Muppet up and decide what you want to be and have the courage and convictions to be true to who you are. And whether we feel most like Kermit, Walter, or Gary, we need to figure that out. I mean, is it even possible? One of my favorite songs by The Bravery says, I remember when I look back on all the best days of my life, I think I saw them all on TV. There's that moment when Walter plasters his face up. And it begs that question, are we chasing rainbows? Did we grow up on the hope and promises of Americana? Even in this movie, it asks, they sing, you can be whatever you want to be. Is that true? The characters in the movie leave small town and see the glorious world for what it really is and what it has to offer, and it doesn't look that good. Sometimes I think that's what reality does to us, doesn't it? 5 hours of screaming later, right? Some of you have been there. Some of you have been there. The world has a wonderful way of trying to crush us, to tell us there is no true, real hope, to shatter those hopes and take away our dreams, or, in Animal's case, take away our drums. But that's what happens, right? The world would tell us our dreams are fleeting, everything decays, everything gets torn down, nothing lasts. Trample on our hope, they rob us of our childlike faith, but that's not the message of the Muppets. The Muppets' message is one of hope. And that's where I was glad they brought things full circle from the original Muppet movie and introduced singing the Rainbow Connection yet again. Why are there so many songs about rainbows? And what's on the other side? Rainbows are visions, but only illusions. And rainbows have nothing to hide. So we've been told, and some choose to believe it. The message of the Muppet says, I know they're wrong. Wait and see. What's so amazing that keeps us stargazing? What do we think we might see? The song, in its beautiful, vague, but hinting way, says, have you been half asleep and have you heard voices? I've heard them calling my name. Heard it too many times to ignore it. It's something that I'm supposed to be. I think if we add that with what Gary tells Walter, he tells him that's what growing up is, becoming who you want to be. But if we listen to the song, The Rainbow Connection, perhaps is it who we were meant to be? Is there somebody calling our name? Is there something that we were supposed to be, that we've fallen away from, that we've forgotten? That's actually the message of the gospel. And it's even hinted again at in that message that Kermit tells Piggy. Of course, he's telling it about their relationship, but in a greater sense, he says, we don't need the whole world to love us, just one person. Right? Somebody that defines us, tells us who we are, man or Muppet, what our priorities are, what our gifts are. The beauty is, for the world of the Christian, it's not someday we'll find it, it's he found us. Right? We're not waiting for someday. We're confidently awaiting the fullness of what we already have in part. The rainbow, according to Scripture, is a form of God's promise. Some of us who watch a film like The Muppets and we enjoy it as fiction, but we ultimately go home jaded, cynical, like Statler and Waldorf. Right? We're the two old guys, incarnate. We scoff, we mock, we heckle the people that seem to have the hopes and dreams. We don't see that eternity in our hearts. We feel empty. Right? And the Psalms have something very specific to say about those who sit in the seat of scoffers. Conversely, the world of the Muppets, they're brought together as an eclectic mishmash of a family that all complements one another. Dysfunctional sometimes, yes. But see, Christians go home knowing, like Gary says, we really will live happily ever after. We can walk out the doors of a theater and know that we're family, because that's what we are, a very crazy but Muppety family of God. So, is your green feeling gray? Do you feel like, man, if I could just do it all again? Do you feel like something's broken, you can't repair it, and things are only pictures in your head? The beauty of the gospel is that someday, as we see in the Muppets, the auditorium, the big stage, Christianity says we're all part of God's amazing show. Someday we'll be gathered like that, seeing everything triumphant. The lights will happen for real. And I love how in the film, Walter and Gary, they got to be part of the Muppet story, even though they weren't the center of it. Right? The story, the movie is called The Muppets. And yet these characters, Walter and Gary, they're invited in. And Kermit looks and he says, don't you want to join us? We get to be part of God's story where he says, don't you want to join my family? And even if you're Bobo the Bear or Uncle Deadly and you realize you've been working for the bad guy, right? God's even taken care of that sin. You're still welcome. You're welcomed into the family. Nothing's broken we can't repair. Nothing's broken that he hasn't already repaired. And so we simply have to receive that reconciliation. They're not just pictures in our head. My hope for those leaving the Muppets would not just be that they enjoyed a few hours, but maybe for their lives, it's time to light that light, where they know they'll live happily ever after, where they know that joy and peace and family and relationship and belonging are possible, not just for a few hours of distraction in a movie, but forever and eternity. I'm James Harleman, and this is Cinemagogue. Hope you enjoyed this review. If you want to check out more examinations of narrative, film, spirituality, be sure to check out cinemagogue.com. And until next time, watch to glorify.